Okay, great. I'm going to give a quick introduction, welcome, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, welcome. My name is Joel Lake. I'm the CEO here today. And Judy asked and motion yesterday for me sort of connect the dots a little bit to the lecture that was planned and so this actually marks the first time that we've had a gathering of anybody in the building that needs to talk about. Fair. So the plan is that Moshe has prepared a presentation, and he's going to make his presentation, and it's impossible to have this presentation and not connect it to what's happening today. Okay? And we talked about it briefly yesterday. So the plan is he's going to make a presentation and open up at some point questions and dialogue, and everybody will have an opportunity to moderate conversation and sort of understand a little bit of perspective, similarities, differences between the Yom Kippur War and today's war and crisis. And people also share some own stories and reflections as they want to as well. And that's the plan. And thank you for being here. It's obviously very, very difficult times for everyone. And certainly having a scholar here talk from a historical perspective and learn and provide context to some of the things that we're all experiencing today and we'll continue to experience. Thank you. You're welcome.
So this presentation was planned a couple of months ago. It was going to be this presentation was planned a couple of months ago. It was kind of review of the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, 50 years. And then we had the event of Then we have the events of last weekend. Yes, we have the events of last weekend. And this was the headline. The next day was the headline in USA Today. What Saturday surprise attack on Israel is reminiscent of 1973. The infiltration of southern Israel by Hamas at daybreak Saturday amid religious holiday prompted Israel Prime Minister to declare a nation at war and stoked memories of another surprise attack that occurred 50 years and 1 day earlier. So I will go now down memory lane. I'll go 50 years earlier. I will really talk mostly about what happened 50 years ago, but towards the end, I'll connect it again to what's been happening today. And I'll put it a little bit in kind of very, very, very personal way. Psychologists talk about what they call formative emotional events, the big events that kind of shapes people's life. And when I make my list, I have 3 such emotional events. One was the Holocaust, happened before I was born, but here I am at about age 12, and I read Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Then, when I was 19, the 73 war, and then I'll talk about it today, and then almost 9 years later, again, now I'm 28, and there was another war. But today I'll focus on the 73 war. Now, you cannot talk about the Yom Kippur War without thinking how it started. So here is how it started. I was in military training in NCO, non-commissioned officer training base in the Galilee. It's Yom Kippur, went to service in the morning. When soldiers daven, it goes very fast. So we were done. I think we were done with Musaf by about 11 o'clock. We went to the barracks, just taking a snooze. And suddenly, 2 p.m., airplane after airplane after airplane going above over the base. Now, Yom Kippur in Israel, you have to understand, Yom Kippur in Israel is like, if you never experience it, it has to be experienced. There's no traffic. Even non-religious people who don't go to the shul, they don't drive on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a very, very quiet day. It's a very solemn day in Israel. And suddenly airplanes by quantities. So we all jumped. What's going on? And also on Yom Kippur, there are no radio services. Everything is silent. Somebody said, let's try the radio. We opened the radio, silent, and then at 2:10, there's an announcement, Israel under attack, both from the north, from Syria, and from the south in the Sinai Peninsula. But we have to go back a few years before that to understand the historical context. You have to go back to the 67 war, in which, just to remind you, Egypt closed the Red Sea for Israeli navigation, which was an act of war. It's a casus belli. And Israel had a surprise attack, stunning victory in 6 days. What you see here is a picture of Moshe Dayan, Yitzhak Rabin, who was the chief of staff, going to the Temple Mount, visit the Temple Mount. I was 13. I remember when the news that Jerusalem was liberated. I remember the men just spontaneously starting dancing and singing and dancing with such jubilation. And Israel tripled its area in 6 days. I mean, the Sinai Peninsula, it's much, much larger than all of Israel. So the victory was so dramatic that a few days later, Moshe Dayan says, now they should be ready for peace. We're waiting for the phone call. After we've captured all these territories, the intention was not to keep them. They'll come and call us and say, we're ready to negotiate. Well, in September of that year, the Arab League had a summit. There was in Khartoum in Sudan, and they issued a resolution. And it became the resolution of the 3 no's, because explicit in the resolution is no peace in Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiation with Israel. These are the 3 famous no's of the Khartoum resolution. So it was clear that we're not going to get peace. In fact, we got another war. We got, in 69, we started what had become known as the War of Attrition. So the line now was the line across the Suez Canal, is Israeli line, Bar-Lev line from the east, and the Egyptian forces from the west. And Egypt had a lot of artillery, and they started shelling the Israeli forts. Israel tried to respond with the Israeli Air Force. The vaunted Israeli Air Force started deep penetration into air raids into Egypt. Egypt couldn't stop it. They asked the Soviet Union to help them. So the Soviet Union started flying planes over Egypt. So Israel led the trap to the Soviet planes. In Operation Rimon on July 30th, 1970, they shot down 5 Soviet MiGs. Now this was going to escalate. Now the United States was getting nervous. You know, they're trying to negotiate the TANT with Soviet Union. This was going to lead to local escalation. So Kissinger gets involved, and a ceasefire is being negotiated. As it happened, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, died from a heart attack just shortly after that. Anwar Sadat replaced him. Now, what at the end of the war of attrition, when Israel started using the Air Force, the Egyptians start moving surface air missile batteries, SAM batteries. And they proved to be quite a threat to the US Air Force. The Israeli Air Force will come back to that. Part of the ceasefire agreement was that they were not supposed to move them, but they violated the ceasefire agreement. They moved them very close, put them essentially on the canal. And we'll see this will play a major role. Now let's come back to me. 1971, I joined, I call it ROTC, but it's in Israel, it's called Academic Reserve, but it's something similar. I started studying, I majored in physics and computer science at Bar-Ilan University, but as part of your, and if you get a deferral of your military service, but during the summers, you go to training. So the first summer, which was the summer of 72, I went to boot camp. And the second summer, I went to NCO course. In October 6th, we have 1 week to go towards the end of the course. Here you see a picture of what I looked like 50 years ago. I haven't changed much. Now, there have been attempts in negotiation. Anwar Sadat, already in 1970, announced he's ready to recognize the right of Israel as an independent state as defined by the Security Council of the United States of the United Nations in return for total Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories. And there was shuttle diplomacy by Gunther Jaring, a Swedish diplomat, and Israel was not willing to accept to go back to the lines of pre-67 lines. And Sadat decided, okay, we're going to war. And in October 72, he declared to his Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, we're going to go to war with Israel. They had they coordinated also with Syria, and they started getting ready for war. So one of the things, major military buildup in Egypt, tanks, modern tanks, SAM batteries, anti-tank missiles, which was then a new thing, anti-tank missile. Israel did not have them. Egypt bought them in big quantities. They started running military exercise near the border. Now, the military exercises had a dual benefit for them. One, they were training. Two, Israel got used to military activity near the Suez Canal. So the next, when something more serious happened, Israel said, oh, they're training again. They didn't realize this is something serious. Israel had a very, very high-placed spy in Egypt, Ashraf Marwan. He was so important. He was his operator. Every spy has an operator. His operator was the head of the Mossad, personally was his operator. In May 73, he said there's going to be a surprise attack in May. Israel had general mobilization. There was no attack. These general mobilizations are very, very expensive because you basically shut down the whole economy. You suddenly take, and this is partly what's happening in Israel now, when you suddenly take hundreds of thousands of men from the economy, it's a major, major disruption to the economy. It's very, very expensive. Now, as we head into October, there are many, many signs that something is afoot, but Israel got burnt by the mobilization of May, so they're very reluctant to do it. In effect, Amman, which is military intelligence that is in charge of assessment, they had what we call later become known as the conceptia, the concept, a cognitive framework that the Egypt does not feel that it is ready for a war. And also, the 67 war was such a dramatic victory, Israel got cocky. They think, well, you know, if they try to attack us, we will just wipe them. I mean, there was really great overconfidence. In September 25, King Hussein flies to Tel Aviv to meet with Golda. And he tells her something is afoot. The Syrian and the Egyptian and Syrian are planning something. He personally told it to Golda. This was not disclosed until 1988. Okay, we'll come back to talk about Golda a bit later. On October 5, Ashraf Marwan, again, tells Tzvi Zamir, the head of the Mossad, come to Switzerland, I need to talk to you. And he tells him, tomorrow at 6 p.m. is going to be war. So now, finally, Israel decided on general mobilization, but they discussed with the United States. The United States says, don't counterattack. Again, the overconfidence, to be able to handle it when it happens. Do not try to have an attack before they attack you, which Israel could have done, but it didn't do it. Kissinger contribution. So this is now we are at 6 p.m. supposed to start the war. Well, it didn't start at 2 p.m. as we saw. So this is just to put you a map so you will see what the frontiers look like. What you see here, the Sinai Peninsula, it's very large. It's 3 times the size of Israel. You see Israel, you see the Red Sea, you see the Suez Canal. Just to give you a picture of what things look like. On October 6, Egypt mounts 5 divisions, 100,000 soldiers, 1,300 tanks, 2,000 guns, lots of SAM batteries, lots of anti-tank missiles. What did Israel have to defend the Suez Canal? 450 soldiers. With one in the back, there was one armored brigade. So the answer is Israel did not have a chance in this kind of view of the imbalance between forces. So Bar-Lev line fell, except one fort that was located it was kind of, around it was water, so it was not easy to access. It was called Fort Budapest. These are just code names. Fort Budapest managed not to fall down. They were able to fend off Egyptian attacks, and this is significant for a reason we'll see later. So Egypt was able to capture the full East Bank and put 2 armies. And if you look at the military hierarchy, you have divisions. Above division, you have armies. So the 2nd and the 3rd armies of Egypt are now on the east side. Israel still was the mentality of 6-day war. Oh, we will just counterattack. We will wipe them out. So on October 8 and 9, there's counterattack by 3 armored brigades that are going against 2 armies. With 3 armored brigades. Above army, you have a division. Okay. We saw Egypt had 5 divisions, Israel attacking with 3 brigades, and they counter a weapon for which they were not ready. And this was the anti-tank missiles. Israel was completely unready for it. They called the Air Force to help them. The Air Force couldn't be effective there. We'll come back to talk about the Air Force later because of the surface-to-air missiles. So it was a very heavy casualties for Israel. The Egyptians tried to advance, but they were not successful in trying to advance. They were not well organized. They did not succeed in advancing them. Now, what happened on the north? The same thing. Syria attacks. On one side, they have 2 armored divisions, 3 infantry divisions. Israel has 2 armored brigades, 1 infantry brigade. I think it was like 800 tanks versus 100 tanks on the Israeli side. Again, overwhelming force. Amazingly, on the north, there are 2 sectors in the Golan Heights. We'll see a map shortly. Maybe I can show you a map. Yeah, here is a map. So you can see there, the Golan Heights is really a fairly small sliver of land. And Syria attacks from the east. Israel tried to defend from the west. The North Line was a very, very famous battle, and Israel was able to fend off the Syrian forces. This is considered one of the greatest defensive battle in military history. It's compared, for example, to the Battle of Bastogne. This is in the Battle of the Bulge. This is where the German commander told I think it was the 101st Airborne, surrender, you have no chance. And the response was, anybody remember? Nuts. Nuts. And I had to check because I thought it would be something a bit cruder than that. But that line they were able to hold, except there was a fort on Mount Hermon, which was called the Eyes of Israel, and that failed to attack the Syrian commanders. This news was not so good on the southern sector. There it was less well defended. Also, the units were less effective, and it essentially collapsed. And the Syrians were able to advance all the way to the margin of the Golan Heights, and the reserves are not there yet. It takes time for the reserve to arrive. People have to go, arrive at the base, get all the equipment ready, get from the base to the Golan Heights. So the Syrian forces were at the edge, and unlike the south, where you have a big empty peninsula, the Sinai Peninsula, in the north you have Tiberias, Sepad, you have towns very nearby. Moshe Dayan was urging the Air Force to attack, even though they were taking very heavy casualties, told them, we are facing the destruction of the third temple. You know, in kind of Jewish history, we have the two Khurban, the two destruction, the first temple, the second temple. Dayan says he was worried about Khurban Abayit HaShlishi. But Syria did not advance beyond the Golan Heights. And then the reserves starting to arrive. And they're not waiting till they have like a full division. They're just, a tank is ready, go and fight. Okay? People were just throwing themselves back against Syria. Now, Dayan was so worried that on October 7th, he summoned the Director General of the Israel Atomic Energy Commission to a meeting with Golda Meir to discuss the possible arming of nuclear weapons. Golda said, no way, we're not going there. However, it turns out, this we only discovered it years later after some Syrian information came up. People wonder, why did the Syrians not advance? They were there, going down from the Golan Heights. It's an empty valley. They could have gone there. They were worried about nuclear weapons. They thought if they go there, Israel will use nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons serve a deterrence, a major role of deterrence. But it took years before we found about it from the Syrian side. So deterrence was very, very important. So let's go back to me. Remember, I'm there. We all jump up. What's going on? Now, amazingly, even though they knew on October 5 there's going to be a war, and I'm serving, I'm not in the I'm in a reserve, but it's a regular base. It's considered the regular army. Nobody told the base commander there's going to be a war. So he's just as surprised as everyone else. He started calling headquarters. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What do you want us to do? So they decided to send us to the central command. Most of the forces were in the north and the south. King Hussein told Israel he does not plan to get involved. He already was burned out in the 67 war. He got involved and he lost a lot of territory. He's not going to make the same mistake again. He told Israel he will not get involved. He did get involved, and we'll see how he did get involved. But Israel still worried, what happened if he changes his mind? Jerusalem had to be defended. So they took my unit, they trained us in anti-armor infantry. We didn't have missiles, we had bazookas. Huge difference in terms of range and precision. But we defended Jerusalem. Also, we were there in case the Palestinians in the West Banks will decide to start some mischief. Now, I recently read an article by American writer Uri Kaufman about 67 war and Golda, and he wrote, I'm quoting verbatim, Jerusalem said undefended. This is just factually not true. I defended Jerusalem. Well, my unit defended Jerusalem. But we saw no action there. We were there for about 2 weeks, no action, which was good news. Means there was no hostilities in Central Command. Now, once Israel counterattack, they start pushing back. And shortly, by October 10, they capture the Golan Heights in full. And now the question, what now? Golda decided the Syrian cannot Syria cannot go unpunished. She said, we're going into Syria. And Israeli forces advances towards Damascus. Damascus is not very far from the Golan Heights. So now other Arab countries decided to help Syria. The Iraqis sent 2 armored divisions. Jordan told Israel, sorry, we cannot, we are under tremendous pressure. So they sent 1 brigade this is beyond the Golan Heights, this is after that, but to the plains between the Golan Heights and Damascus. And that was a big fight there, and Israel decided to stop about 25 kilometers from Damascus. So essentially, by October 15 or so, it's become quiet on the northern front. On October 20th, after Israel became convinced that Jordan will not attack in the center, they moved us to the Golan Heights. We redeployed them. There was one more thing Israel had to do there, which was to recapture Mount Hermon Fort. This was done by Golani Brigade, which is a elite infantry unit, and the paratrooper brigade. The paratroopers came with helicopters from above. Golani went up from below, climbed the mountain. It's a horrendous climb with full equipment, full gear. And my unit was reserve. And fortunately for us, the Golani and the paratroopers handled the job, because if they couldn't handle the job, I probably would not have been here. So I really saw no action in the war. I was in the war, but I didn't see any battle. I'll come back to that. Now let's go back to the south. So we saw Egypt does manage to establish itself two armies on the eastern side. Israel counterattacked, they were defeated. Now Syria is fighting hard, and Egypt decided to help Syria by mounting a major attack. They tried to break out of the beachheads with 1,000 tanks. The goal was to capture strategic passes in Sinai Peninsula. Once you capture them, you kind of control the Sinai Peninsula, and also force Israel to divert forces from the Golan Heights. But they had to leave the cover of the same batteries, because they were moving out of the range of the same batteries. And now it was not about a defensive war with their anti-tank infantry. It's a maneuver war, and that was something Israel was very good at. So even though Israel had numerical inferiority, they had the Israeli Air Force, and Israel is very good in war of maneuver, and Egypt lost a major loss for Egypt there. And they had to go back, and after that, they never tried to break out. In fact, inside Egypt, there was a huge fight over this. Shazli, who was the chief of staff, said, it's risky for us to get out of the range of the same batteries, because the Israeli Air Force will attack us. Sadat overruled him, and Bashazli was right. It was a major Egyptian mistake. As this unfolds, the Israeli generals discovered, the Israeli military discovered that there are two armies there in the south, second and third, and in between there is a gap. You don't want two military units to sit too close to each other, because it's a risk of friendly fire. So they kept a little distance, and that's a gap between them. So Arik Sharon had a plan. We're going to leverage that gap and cross the Suez Canal and attack the Egyptians from the back. So on October 15, Israeli paratroopers crossed the canal on rubber boats, established a beachhead. Then they come up with motorized rafts, and tanks started to cross. And nobody is waiting for them. This was, again, strategic surprise for the Egyptians. Nobody waited for them on the other side. Nobody thought that this is going to happen. So they go to the other side. There are no forces there. So they start attacking some batteries. And that means they're giving more freedom to the Israeli Air Force. And here you see, again, two maps. You see here the Suez Canal. You have the two Egyptian armies on the eastern side. And where you see the thick arrow, this is where the Israeli forces come from the south and from the north, and they are now crossing the canal and attacking Egypt from the western side. I'll come back to the other map a bit later. Now, the two armies are there, there is a gap. What if they discover the Israelis leveraging the gap to invade? They can close the gap. If they close the gap, the Israeli forces on the west bank are suddenly trapped there. They have no line of supply. So the IDF said we must not only keep the gap open, but even broaden it. So Sharon was ordered to secure the bridgehead. And there was a very, very fierce battle. It's called the Chinese Farm Battle. I think Chinese Farm, so it's not, what the hell is Chinese Farm? So it turned out it was a Japanese agricultural project there. Here are the soldiers. Japanese have two alphabets, hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Kanji is Chinese letters. So the Israeli soldier came there, saw Chinese. Later they said this, call it the Chinese farm. Nothing to do with China. But it was a very, very heavy battle. Israel took heavy casualties there. Ehud Barak, this was one of his big battles. He went later on to become chief of staff, prime minister. I heard him this morning on the radio. So Israel managed to keep the beachhead, the bridgehead open and to broaden it. By October 21, it's now 25 miles wide, 20 miles deep. So the invading forces, the landing forces on the west are much more secure now. The worry that they will be trapped on the other side is diminished. So now people call it the war in Africa. Once you call Suez Canal, you're in Africa. African sounds very exotic. So we were talking, where do you come from? Oh, I just operated in Africa. It sounds very exotic. So they continue to push west, north, and south. On the north, and you can see here, if I go back to this map, you see here the Israeli kind of, what happened is Israeli pushes on the west side of the Suez Canal. They go west, north, and south. Why do they want to go north? They want to capture a city called Ismailia, because this is the supply hub for the Second Army, which is deployed on the northern side of the canal. They wanted to cut off the Second Army from supply. Israel did not succeed. But they were able to go farther west and destroy artillery batteries, some even capture airport. Israel was able to start supplying its forces by air, because now they can operate an air force on the western side. And they push all the way south. They push all the way south in the way south. This is Suez City, which sits there. And this is the supply hub of the Third Army, which is deployed on the south here. So the two armies was the Second Army on the north and the Third Army on the south. Israel was able to encircle, reach, and ultimately encircle the Suez city. Now, at this point, there was all kind of international attempt to stop the war. On October 22, the UN Security Council declared order ceasefire. Well, the skirmishes continue. Both sides blame the other side. It's not completely clear who did it. But Israel says, well, they're not obeying the ceasefire, so we're not going to obey either. They keep pushing. Israel had interest in fully encircling Suez city. And they were able to do it by 23. They tried to capture the whole city, and they were not successful. It was a very bloody battle there. At the end, Israel had about half the city. Egypt had about the second half of the city. Now, by October 24, Israel is fighting over Suez city. The Soviet Union threatened to send a peacekeeping force. Now, here Nixon says, no way. And the US declared DEFCON 3, which is the highest nuclear readiness of the United States. And that's the Soviets said, okay, we're not going there. And then another resolution was passed by the UN Security Council, Resolution 340. And okay, this time it was obeyed. By October 28, we had an effective ceasefire. So hostilities were over effectively by October 28. So the final state in Egypt was Egypt had about 1,200 square kilometers territory in Sinai that it held. Israel had 1,600 kilometers in Egypt. Most significantly, the Third Army was encircled. In fact, one of the things that was negotiated to allow supply to reach the Third Army. And Israel was about 100 kilometers from Cairo. And there were no significant military forces to defend Cairo. If Israel wanted to advance on Cairo, not much to stop Israel at that point. So back to me. Fortunately, I did not have to climb up Mount Hermon, and but I was not October when the ceasefire was finally effective. We thought they are going to release us. I went back to the university. The school year was in Israel start usually after the high holidays, so it starts later than here. Start usually late October, but it was postponed. But it was postponed by about a month. So I was ready to go back to my studies, but they kept me until middle of April 74. I was assigned to Central Command. I was assistant chief of staff. Together with me was a very good friend of mine, and we are two physicists kind of serving in a base. The nickname was the two smartest corporals in CENTCOM. And we did something that was actually quite amazing for a corporal. The Central Command, even though there was no fighting in Central Command, many Central Command units went to fight in the north or south. And after the war, there's always lesson learned. What did we learn from this? What did we do well? What did not do well? What are the conclusions? And Razi and I helped in writing these conclusions. I mean, we would not come up with conclusions, but editing and talking to people and doing this job. By April, I was released, and I had to go back finish my studies. So I had to finish my studies in about 4 months, finish the whole academic year, between April and August, finish the whole academic year. And then by 74, finish my study. October 74, finish my studies. September 74, finish my studies. It was time to me go and start my regular military service. I served for 4 years after that. So the level of casualties in Israel at the time was about 2,800 dead from a population of about 3.3 million. It would have been in 3 weeks. This was an equivalent in the US, maybe 170,000 people. I mean, it was a huge, very high level of casualties. And there was tremendous amounts of anger in the country. How did it happen? And the talk was about ha-mehdal. So I decided, okay, what is mehdal in English? So I went to dictionary and said mehdal it's really comes from a Hebrew word is to not do something. So the dictionary says omission. But omission does not have the resonance, the connotation, the emotional resonance of mehdal. Mehdal is a very powerful word. So the best, I've done some research, and I learned a new word in English, nonfeasance. I'm sure you're all familiar with malfeasance. Nonfeasance is a legal word, means not carrying out your legal duties. You're bound to do them, you didn't do them, called nonfeasance. And the main failure was failing to prepare to the IDF for war. The IDF was not prepared for war properly. And I said, you start to see resonance with what's happening over the past week. IDF was not prepared, and there were very concrete warnings, and they were not heeded to, which also seems something similar has happened here. And a protest movement started. Remember Fort Budapest, which was the only fort that did not fall. Its commanding officer, Moti Ashkenazi, was, even though his unit did well, he was outraged by the nonfeasance of the Israeli government, and he started first a personal protest movement. He would go against the Prime Minister Manchin and start a protest, calling for the government to resign. And more people joined him. It became a very powerful protest movement. By November, so it's about a month after the war, there is a state commission of inquiry is established, headed by the kind of highest authority, so to speak, the Chief Justice, Shimon Agranat. It became known as the Agranat Commission. Now, in December, there is election. Labor still wins the election. The country was still in shock, and not much was understood about what happened. So Goldar won the election in December of 73. Now, the Agranat Commission is controversial to this very day. One is its charge was relatively narrow. The government got to write the charge of the commission, and it wrote it to focus on military side, on the intelligence and the way it conducted its affairs in the first few days of the war. For example, the Agranat Commission did not know about Hussein's visit. Hussein's visit was only disclosed in 1988. It was a huge secret for many, many years. So you think, like 15 years, there was a secret. It was not known that Golda heard from Hussein personally. He came to her office to talk to her about the plans for war. So because the charge was so narrow, the Agranat Commission only made a recommendation against military officers. It says that chief of military intelligence and the the commander of Southern Command, Shmuel Gonen, Eliyahu Zira, they said they should be dismissed. They found the chief of staff responsible for military failures. They didn't pass any judgment on Moshe Dayan because he was a minister of defense, which means he was a politician rather than a military officer. The narrow focus on military officer caused another outrage in the country, and Golda ended up resigning. And by 77, there was another election, and Labor, who ruled the country from its establishment all the way to 77, lost the election for the first time to, at the time, it was some precursor to the Likud of today. So this was known as the Mahapach. The Mahapach stands for revolution, but revolution is too strong. Mahapach is more the upheaval, a change in Israel after decades of labor in the government. The right wing finally won. Of course, when there's a war, people say, who won the war? The answer is, in some sense, no one won the war. On a narrow military criteria, Israel had the upper hand. They were 40 kilometers from Damascus, 100 kilometers from Cairo. The Third Army was encircled, but Israel had very, very heavy casualties. And most importantly, the Syrian and Egyptian army proved that they can be effective fighting forces. And that means from their point of view, they've regained the honor they lost in 1967. 1967 wasn't just defeat, it was a shameful defeat. Now, maybe they didn't win, but they proved that they can fight effectively. But from their point of view, they had the best advantage. They managed to have strategic supplies of Israel, and they still did not win the war. So they realized Israel is very strong. And I mean, both sides now had incentive to perhaps be a little more flexible, rethink, opening new possibilities. To realize that Israel lost its arrogance, Egypt and Syria regained their honor, but they realized they cannot defeat Israel, something that they thought, okay, it's time to negotiate. And Kissinger first negotiated the Camp David agreement, the disengagement agreement, which was separating Israel withdrew from all the territories it captured in the October War, and there was a separation between Israeli and Arab forces, and that held even in Syria. This holds to this very day, this separation. When I was deployed later as an artillery officer on the Golan Heights in my regular service, we were at the very western side of the Golan Heights because of the separation agreement. We couldn't be too close to the frontier. And then a few years later, we had the Camp David Accord, Carter, Begin, Moshe Dayan, I'll come back to Moshe in a minute, Sadat. Sadat came in 77, addressed the Israeli Knesset. It was like an earth-shaking event. What? An Egyptian president is talking to the Knesset. It was just astounding event. And Israel did not withdraw to the 67 line. It withdrew to the international border. What was the international border? It was the line that marked the separation between the British and the Ottomans after World War I. That was the line. And they had to bring historians to reconstruct that line. Israel said, we will withdraw to the international line. And that's what it withdrew. And we have formal recognition and diplomatic relationship with Egypt. Another important consequence that really affects all of us is what happened with the oil embargo. We're now 50 years to the oil embargo. So after the war, OAPC, you hear about OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. There is OAPEC, which is the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, and they declare embargo against nations that supported Israel in the war, Canada, Japan, Netherlands, UK, US, United States. By March 74, oil prices have tripled, and oil is such an important resource for the economy that it remade. Daniel Yergin, who is a famous historian of oil, he said this has remade the national economy. In particular, it caused stagflation. If you're old enough, you remember stagflation, where there was economic stagnation and inflation at the same time. This was in the 70s. This happened during the Carter administration, and it played a huge role in Carter's loss to Ronald Reagan. So the oil embargo affected the history of this country very significantly. Now, there's a lot to talk about Golda, partly because of the recent move. So the movie is just a movie, okay? Do not take it as any historical account of what happened. Just ignore the movie. If you like it, you didn't like it, it's just a movie. So Golda was blamed for her refusal before the war, before Yom Kippur War, to withdraw to the 611 lines. And people say, well, the Camp David Accord, Israel did withdraw to almost the 67 lines. But people misunderstood. Sadat wanted Israel to withdraw on all fronts, giving up Jerusalem, giving up the Golan Heights. It was not negotiated with Israel just over the boundary between Israel and Egypt. That was his condition. Complete withdrawal from all territories that Israel captured in 67. So I think this is not fair to accuse her for being too rigid there. On the other hand, she's responsible for the delay. She headed the military cabinet. The decision was on her. She talked to Hussein, who told her there's going to be an attack. And I've never forgiven her for saying, all the men in the cabinet objected to mobilization, and I'm a woman. If you're a prime minister of Israel, you don't get to say, I'm a woman. I'm sorry. It's your choice to be prime minister. It's not an excuse. We can debate it over a lot, but to me, that's not an excuse. I didn't call because all the men said don't mobilize. So I hold the responsible. And this was the only time that I voted for the right wing in Israel. Now, Moshe Dayan, complicated figure, lots of nuance, nothing black and white. Before the war, he actually proposed to Golda a partial pullback away from the Suez Canal, enabling Egypt to reopen the Suez Canal and taking some of the motivation of Egypt to try to attack. Golda rejected the idea. On the other hand, he was a member of the military cabinet. He did not push for mobilization. At the war, he kind of talked about the destruction of the Third Temple. He was supposed to give a national address. Golda was afraid that he would demoralize the country, and she said, no, you're not going to talk to the country. In fact, there are accounts that he was visiting the different frontiers, and much after the war, after he died, General said he was taking huge risks. And there are even speculation that he almost courted death. He wants to end up as some kind of a military hero. After the war, he was accused. People call him murderer because of so many lives lost. His name was rehabilitated by Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin called him as his foreign minister and gave him an important part in negotiating the Camp David Accord. So, complicated figure. Now, remember, I may keep talking about the missile, because there was tremendous confidence in Israel Air Force. Partly between 6 and 7, Israel destroyed the Egyptian and the Arab Air Forces in 2 hours. It was, again, an amazing military operation that still to this day they studied in military academies. But then during the war of attrition, the Egyptians start advancing same batteries. And Azar Weissman, who used to be the commander of the Israeli Air Force, said the missile bent the wing of the plane. Now, Israel knew about it, so the Israeli Air Force had a doctrine. First, we're only going to focus on destroying the same batteries. Only then we can help the ground forces. But the situation was so urgent. Moshe Dayan told them, you must attack. They started with the Third Temple. So they did attack without destroying the same batteries, and they suffered very heavy casualties. But they learned their lessons. 9 years later, the 82 war, there is something called Operation Mole Cricket 19. Why is it called Mole Cricket 19? Syria put same batteries in Lebanon. Israel said, not again. And in about 2.5 hours, they destroyed 19 same batteries. Syria sent 100 jet fighters to try to intercept the Israeli planes, and they lost 29 planes. Israeli had no plane was lost. The Syrian defense minister said, we were outclassed. In 2002, I found an article in the US Air Force magazine They said this has huge implications for the Soviet Union. They realized that technology is falling behind the West. And this was one of the reasons for starting, perestroika and all of these things. They said we cannot keep up with the United States militarily. And if you hear about drones, the first military application of drones was in Mall Cricket 19. Israel used drones to attack the SAM batteries. I want to talk a little bit about, go back to casualties. So what you saw before, it was about 0.1% of the Israeli population were killed. But it's much, much worse than that, because the casualties are practically all men between 18 and 45. So it's much, in this segment of the population, it was much more concentrated. In 67, there is a famous song, Givat HaTachmoshet, Ammunition Hill. And the final stanza is, the sun in the east rose higher on 45 bunkers. On brothers the men remained there forever, age 19. And if you ask me why I'm still traumatized by the Yom Kippur War, it's because of that. My pain is ever with me. And I want to read you their name. I lost 5 friends in that war. Yeshayahu Holtz, Eliyahu Lieberman, Zvi Nussbaum, Igal Peleg, Avner Yonah. And you can see they're all 20 or 21 years old, forever. And now this will become known, I predict, the Simchat Torah War. Another war started the major holidays. And now I would say this will be called Amerdal Shel Netanyahu, Netanyahu's malfeasance. On one hand, there was a colossal military, intelligence, and operational failure. And it's not me saying that. I heard Ehud Barak this morning on the radio saying exactly this. But also political failure. Now we've been months of dividing the country by trying to push extreme judicial reforms, pushing for more and more settlement activities in Judea and Samaria, which means you have to put more and more military forces to protect them. That's what the IDF was doing, protecting settlements. And IDF had been warning reduction in readiness, decrease in deterrence capability, possibility of multi-front flare-up. It was just ignored by the very extreme government in Israel. I'm sure they will pay the price. In these days, the traditional prayer for the state of Israel, O Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread it over the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and the fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. My own thing when I deal with adversity, I have 3 buzzwords how to deal with adversity. One is attitude, always control your attitude. I learned it from reading Viktor Frankl about man's search for meaning, how do you survive the Holocaust? Attitude. The one is gratitude. There are all the things you can be grateful for. And the last thing is always hope for a better tomorrow. So I invite you all to get up for a rendition of the Hatikva. Now we'll just see if technology works here. There is a network. It's spinning. They will sing much better than me. That's why I want to play it. Come on. Okay, it's coming. It's coming. So it's going, yeah, transferring data. There we go. שנות 2000. You may sit. This is my story, and I will happy now to take questions.
Comments?
Thoughts?
Thoughts?
Feelings?
No wells. We don't have wells to describe what's going on. We are speechless. We are speechless about no wells. Somebody, a friend of ours, said yesterday, I'm talking now about the Hamas.
Yes.
So they are like animals. So somebody said, no, they are not like animals because animals don't do these kind of things. They are monsters.
No. It's a barbaric.
So animals are good.
It's a barbaric behavior, and I mean, I think that any human being should say, yes, but there's no yes, but it's utterly barbaric behavior. And who said, Edmund Burke, for evil to win, good people have to say nothing. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of good people who are saying nothing. Okay. I was embarrassed by a message from the President of Rice University 2 days ago. It expressed regret about the incidents in the Middle East. Okay, I'm sorry. There's no time for moral equivocation. This has just been what is committed. It's a moral outrage for every human being. And I have to say, I received but a flurry of email of the last few days, email of support, including from, I don't know, many of them are professional colleagues. I don't know exactly what the religions, but names like Muhammad and Mahmoud, they call names like this. They wrote to me saying, this is just an outrage for every human being. Every human being should be outraged. I mean, as you see, I'm not a fan of the Netanyahu government. And when you talk about the Middle East, they have played not a constructive role, but what happened there was just an atrocity, a barbaric atrocity. And I think every human being should just throw up from reaction to this. I think partly we are all it is so horrific, we're all still numb. It is very difficult for us to actually, the Hatikva managed to, I see some people react to Hatikva. We need something to help us feel our feelings. They are so extreme right now. Yes.
I want to ask if you feel there is Israel here shocked by the support of the U.S. government, military, and everything. Do you feel that there is a difference in supporting Kippur now?
So,
Repeat
ask about U.S. support. The question was about U.S. support. I think Biden had a speech of support to Israel, which was, I could not have asked for anything better than that. It was one of the strongest statements of support. And it's partly called evil. Evil is evil. It has to be called evil. And he said, it's just evil. Okay. There are debates. What is the right thing to do right now? That's not obvious. Okay. It's not obvious what the right thing to do, and I don't know that I have the strategic expertise to tell the Israeli government what should be done. Okay, and partly is because many assumptions of the Israeli governments were proven to be wrong now. Okay, but I think people should just first of all say, let's try to figure out what is the path forward. But what happened is a moral outrage. Yes, please. Why don't you come here? Use the mic.
It's okay.
No,
As
okay.
an Israeli, living in Houston, I want to reach out to non-Israelis here who are obviously supporters and ask you, please stay united. Central Israel, there's huge propaganda out there spread by Hamas